Most people don't stay stuck because they don't know what to do. They stay stuck because they don't know when to stop. They keep explaining themselves to people who already decided not to understand them. They keep investing energy into situations that quietly drain them. They keep hoping that if they endure just a little longer, something will change. Stoicism begins with a brutal but freeing idea. Your life gets lighter the moment you stop carrying what no longer belongs to you. Walking away is not a dramatic exit or an emotional reaction. It is a calm recognition that something has crossed the line from effort into self-betrayal. The Stoic rule for knowing when to walk away starts with one simple question: is this within my control anymore? Stoics believed that peace comes from clearly separating what you can influence from what you cannot. If you have spoken honestly, acted with integrity, and given reasonable effort, then the outcome is no longer yours to manage. When you stay beyond that point, you are not being loyal, patient, or strong. You are trying to control what cannot be controlled, and that is where frustration, resentment, and quiet anger begin to grow. Another Stoic signal that it's time to walk away is when a situation requires you to constantly shrink yourself. If you find yourself rehearsing conversations in your head, walking on eggshells, or silencing your values just to keep the peace, that is not harmony. Stoics valued inner alignment more than external approval. Anything that forces you to betray your principles for comfort or acceptance is already costing you too much. Endurance is a virtue only when it does not corrode your character. The Stoics also warned against confusing attachment with duty. Just because you've invested time, love, money, or effort does not mean you are required to keep investing forever. This is known today as the sunk cost trap, but Stoics understood it long before modern psychology. They believed wisdom meant judging the present moment clearly, not being chained to the past. If staying requires you to ignore reality and cling to who or what something used to be, walking away becomes an act of clarity, not failure. There is also a deeper Stoic rule that many people miss. If a situation is actively shaping you into someone you do not respect, it is time to leave. Stoics believed that your character is your most valuable possession. If a relationship, job, environment, or pattern is making you bitter, reactive, dishonest, or fearful, then it is harming the one thing you are responsible for protecting. No external reward is worth the slow erosion of self-respect. Stoicism teaches that walking away does not require anger, revenge, or explanations. You do not owe everyone a closing argument. Sometimes the most disciplined response is silence paired with decisive action. When you stop arguing with reality and accept what something truly is, the need to convince others disappears. You simply redirect your energy toward what allows you to live with steadiness and dignity. Finally, the Stoic rule is this: stay only where your effort still produces growth, clarity, or virtue. The moment your effort only produces exhaustion, confusion, or self-doubt, you have your answer. Walking away is not quitting on life. It is choosing not to waste it. One of the hardest truths Stoicism teaches is that discomfort alone is not a reason to leave. Growth is uncomfortable. Discipline is uncomfortable. Having hard conversations is uncomfortable. So the Stoic does not walk away at the first sign of difficulty. Instead, they ask a deeper question. Is this pain building me, or is it breaking me down? If the struggle is strengthening your patience, sharpening your character, or forcing you to mature, then stay. But if the struggle is slowly draining your spirit, clouding your judgment, and making you question your worth, then it is no longer growth, it is decay. Another Stoic principle is emotional neutrality. When you are overly emotional, either attached or angry, you cannot judge clearly. So, the Stoic rule for walking away requires distance. Imagine looking at your situation as if it belonged to someone else. If a friend described the same circumstances to you, what advice would you give them? We often tolerate things for ourselves that we would never tolerate for someone we love. The Stoic trains themselves to step outside their emotions long enough to see the facts without distortion. There is also the issue of repeated patterns. Stoics paid close attention to patterns because patterns reveal truth. Anyone can apologize once. Anyone can promise change once. But if the same disrespect, betrayal, or instability keeps happening, that is not a mistake anymore. It is a pattern, and a pattern is character. When you keep hoping for different results from the same behavior, you are no longer being hopeful, you're being unrealistic. Stoicism demands realism, even when it hurts. Time is another factor the Stoics took seriously. Your time is limited. Every hour you give to something misaligned is an hour you cannot give to something meaningful. When you remain in a situation out of fear, fear of starting over, fear of being alone, fear of what others will think, you are trading present discomfort for long-term regret. The Stoics often reflected on mortality, not to be morbid, but to stay sharp. If your life is finite, then staying where you are not respected or growing becomes a costly decision. Stoicism also teaches that peace is evidence. If you constantly feel restless, anxious, or on edge around a person or situation, that is information. Your mind and body often detect misalignment before your logic does. The Stoic does not ignore these signals, but they also do not react impulsively. They observe, they assess, they gather evidence over time. When the evidence consistently shows instability or disrespect, walking away becomes a rational conclusion, not an emotional outburst. There is a subtle but powerful shift that happens when you finally accept that you cannot force others to value you correctly. Stoicism reminds us that people act according to their nature and understanding. You can communicate, you can set boundaries, you can model respect, but you cannot manufacture someone else's character. The moment you stop trying to reform people who have no intention of reforming themselves, you reclaim a massive amount of mental energy. And perhaps the clearest Stoic rule of all is this: if staying requires you to abandon self-respect, then leaving is not optional. Self-respect is the anchor of a steady life. Without it, you are constantly negotiating your worth based on how others treat you. With it, you understand that walking away is sometimes the highest form of discipline. It is the quiet refusal to participate in your own diminishment. Another truth Stoicism presses into you is that endurance is not the same as loyalty. Many people stay because they confuse suffering with virtue. They believe that if they can tolerate enough, they are proving something, to themselves, to others, or even to life itself. But the Stoics never glorified unnecessary suffering. They believed strength meant choosing wisely, not bleeding quietly. Staying in something that consistently violates your boundaries does not make you noble. It makes you unavailable for a better use of your energy. Stoicism also warns against the ego trap that says, if I walk away, I lose. The ego hates endings because it ties identity to outcome. But the Stoic sees walking away not as loss, but as correction. You are not erasing effort, you are stopping further damage. When a ship is taking on water, the wise captain doesn't argue with the sea. They change course. Letting go is often the moment you regain control, not the moment you surrender it. There is also the Stoic idea of voluntary withdrawal. Sometimes you walk away, not because someone harmed you, but because the situation no longer aligns with who you are becoming. Growth changes your tolerances. What once felt acceptable may later feel suffocating. Stoics believed that evolution of character was natural and necessary. Staying loyal to an outdated version of yourself out of guilt or habit is a quiet form of self-abandonment. The Stoics placed enormous value on inner order. If a situation constantly disrupts your ability to think clearly, sleep peacefully, or act calmly, it is interfering with your inner governance. You cannot live wisely while your inner world is in constant turmoil. Walking away, in this sense, is not about escape. It is about restoring order. It is choosing an environment where your better qualities can exist without constant resistance. Another sign it is time to leave is when boundaries must be defended over and over again. A boundary that is repeatedly violated is not a boundary, it is a request. Stoicism teaches that boundaries are statements of fact, not negotiations. If someone consistently ignores them, they are telling you something important about how they see you. At that point, walking away becomes the boundary itself. Stoics also believed in acting without theatrics. Walking away does not require closure speeches, dramatic confrontations, or public explanations. Often, the most powerful exits are quiet. You stop responding the same way. You stop overgiving. You stop showing up where you are not valued. This is not passive aggression. It is disciplined detachment. You are not punishing anyone. You are protecting your peace. There is a deep relief that comes when you accept that some doors are meant to be closed without slamming them. The Stoic does not burn bridges out of anger, but they also do not keep crossing bridges that lead nowhere. They leave with their dignity intact, carrying forward the lesson instead of the wound. There is another layer to this rule that most people resist. Sometimes you must walk away from the version of yourself that keeps tolerating what you know is wrong. Stoicism is not just about leaving people or places, it is about leaving patterns. If you repeatedly find yourself in the same kind of situation, disrespected, overlooked, undervalued, the common thread is not fate, it is tolerance. The Stoic asks, what in me keeps allowing this? That question is uncomfortable, but it is powerful. Walking away externally means nothing if you return internally to the same habits. The Stoics understood that fear often disguises itself as responsibility. You may tell yourself you are staying because you are committed, loyal, patient, or understanding. But underneath that language is often fear, fear of loneliness, fear of starting over, fear of financial instability, fear of judgment. Stoicism does not shame fear, it confronts it. It asks you to name it directly. Once fear is named, it loses much of its control. Then the decision to stay or leave can be made from reason instead of anxiety. Another Stoic filter is this. Does this situation allow me to practice virtue consistently? Virtue, in Stoic terms, means wisdom, courage, justice, and self-control. If staying requires you to lie to yourself, suppress your voice, explode in anger, or act against fairness, then it is pulling you away from virtue. And for the Stoic, nothing is more important than living in alignment with virtue. Success without virtue is hollow. Comfort without integrity is unstable. If walking away restores your ability to live honestly and calmly, it is the wiser path. Stoicism also reminds you that not every battle deserves your participation. Some arguments are traps. Some environments are designed around chaos. Some people thrive on conflict. When you keep engaging, you are feeding the system. Walking away in these moments is not weakness. It is strategic disengagement. You conserve your energy for battles that actually matter. The Stoic chooses where to invest attention carefully because attention is life force. There is also a maturity in recognizing that you cannot save everyone. Many people stay in harmful situations because they believe they can fix the other person. They believe their patience, love, or sacrifice will eventually inspire change. Stoicism rejects this illusion. You can influence, but you cannot rescue someone from their own unwillingness. The more you try to carry someone who refuses to walk, the more you delay your own progress. Walking away sometimes becomes the only way to stop enabling dysfunction. One of the clearest indicators it is time to leave is emotional numbness. When you stop feeling anger, stop feeling hope, stop feeling investment, that is not peace, that is depletion. The Stoics valued emotional steadiness, not emotional shutdown. If you are staying only because you feel too tired to move, that is not loyalty. That is burnout. Walking away in this state is not dramatic, it is restorative. And then there is this. When you imagine your future, does this situation exist in the life you are building? The Stoics constantly visualize their ideal character. They ask themselves who they wanted to become. If what you are holding on to does not fit inside the person you are trying to grow into, you already know the answer. Walking away is sometimes the bridge between who you are and who you are meant to be. There is a quiet confidence that forms when you stop begging situations to work. Stoicism teaches that dignity is not loud. It does not argue, chase, or plead. When you finally accept that something is not aligned, you move differently. You stop explaining yourself. You stop hoping people will suddenly see your worth. You begin acting from self-trust instead of external validation. That shift alone changes how you show up everywhere else in your life. The Stoics also believed that clarity often arrives after repeated disappointment, not because the pain was necessary, but because repetition removes illusion. When the same outcome keeps appearing, it is no longer bad luck, it is information. The wise person listens to information instead of fighting it. If you feel like life is giving you the same lesson over and over, it may be because you have not yet made the decision that lesson requires. There is a moment in every serious life where you must choose between comfort and truth. Comfort says, stay where you are, it's familiar. Truth says, this no longer serves who you are becoming. Stoicism sides with truth every time, even when truth demands loss, because temporary comfort costs far more in the long run than a clean, honest break. If this message is hitting close to home, pause for a moment and reflect honestly. Ask yourself where you are forcing endurance instead of choosing wisdom. Ask yourself what you are tolerating that is quietly draining you. And if you find value in this kind of thinking, if it's helping you see your life more clearly, support the channel by liking this video, sharing it with someone who may need it, and subscribing to Psychovest so you can continue building a life guided by discipline, clarity, and self-respect. Another Stoic insight is that walking away often feels wrong at first because it goes against conditioning. Many of us were taught that quitting is failure and staying is strength. But Stoicism redefines strength as the ability to act according to reason, not habit. When you choose to walk away deliberately, without bitterness or chaos, you are exercising one of the highest forms of self-mastery. Over time, something powerful happens. The energy you were spending managing dysfunction becomes available for growth. Your mind becomes quieter. Your decisions become cleaner. You stop living in reaction mode and start living in intention. Stoicism teaches that peace is not found by fixing everything around you. It is found by removing what constantly disrupts your inner order. As you continue to live by this rule, you begin to notice how much of your suffering came not from loss, but from resistance. Resistance to endings, resistance to disappointment, resistance to the truth that something had already run its course. Stoicism teaches acceptance not as passivity, but as precision. When you stop resisting what is clearly over, you stop wasting emotional energy arguing with reality, and reality, once accepted, becomes far easier to navigate. Another subtle shift happens in how you choose people and environments moving forward. Once you've learned to walk away without guilt, you no longer bond through struggle alone. You stop mistaking intensity for meaning. You become more selective, not because you are guarded, but because you are clearer. Stoicism sharpens discernment. You start asking better questions at the beginning instead of hoping things will improve at the end. There is also a deep internal rebalancing that occurs when you stop over-functioning in broken situations. Many people unconsciously take on the role of fixer, stabilizer, or emotional anchor. Stoicism asks you to put that responsibility back where it belongs. You are responsible for your actions, your values, and your conduct, not for carrying the emotional weight of others who refuse to carry their own. Walking away restores fairness to the equation. Stoics understood that freedom is largely internal, but environment matters. You can have discipline, wisdom, and patience, yet still be trapped in a setting that constantly undermines those qualities. When you leave such environments, you are not running away from challenge. You are choosing a battlefield where your efforts are not wasted. The right environment does not remove difficulty, but it allows progress instead of stagnation. Over time, you may notice fewer dramatic highs and lows. Stoicism does not promise excitement, it promises stability. When you stop chasing validation and stop tolerating disrespect, life becomes quieter. And in that quiet, clarity grows. You begin to trust yourself more because your actions align with your values. Walking away becomes less painful each time, not because you care less, but because you understand more. There is also a quiet authority that develops when people realize you no longer negotiate your self-respect. You do not threaten to leave. You do not issue ultimatums. You simply adjust your presence. Those who respect you will feel it. Those who benefited from your tolerance will resist it. Stoicism teaches you not to be moved by either reaction. Your role is not to manage perceptions, only conduct. Eventually, the rule becomes instinctive. You feel it when something crosses from challenge into compromise. You recognize when patience turns into self-erasure, and instead of waiting for a breaking point, you act early, calmly, and decisively. This is the Stoic advantage. Fewer regrets, fewer emotional debts, fewer years spent explaining why something should have worked. And as this way of living settles in, walking away no longer feels like an ending. It feels like alignment. At a certain point, you realize that walking away is not something you do to others. It is something you do for yourself. Stoicism strips the drama out of decisions and replaces it with responsibility. You stop framing departures as betrayals or failures and start seeing them as course corrections. Just as a skilled navigator adjusts direction without apology, the Stoic adjusts their life without resentment. You also begin to notice how rarely people actually leave when they should. Most wait until they are angry enough to justify it, wounded enough to explain it, or exhausted enough to collapse into it. Stoicism teaches a cleaner exit. You leave while you are still calm. You leave while you can still speak kindly. You leave before bitterness becomes part of your personality. This is not avoidance. This is foresight. There is a profound humility in accepting that some things will never be what you hoped they would be. Hope is powerful, but misplaced hope can keep you imprisoned. The Stoics did not reject hope. They disciplined it. They believed hope should follow evidence, not override it. When hope becomes denial, walking away becomes an act of honesty. Another overlooked aspect is self-trust. Every time you ignore your internal signal that something is wrong, you weaken your relationship with yourself. Over time, this creates confusion and self-doubt. Stoicism restores self-trust by teaching you to listen to reasoned intuition. When you finally act on it, when you walk away instead of rationalizing, you rebuild confidence in your own judgment. Stoicism also reframes solitude. Many people stay in bad situations because they fear being alone. But the Stoics valued solitude as a place of recalibration, not punishment. Being alone is far healthier than being surrounded by people or conditions that constantly drain you. Solitude, when chosen, becomes a training ground for clarity, discipline, and self-respect. There is also the matter of timing. Walking away too late often means you leave carrying wounds instead of lessons. Stoicism encourages early wisdom. The goal is not to endure until collapse, but to notice misalignment before damage becomes permanent. The earlier you act, the less you have to heal later. Over time, this rule changes how you define success. Success becomes less about endurance and more about alignment. Less about proving something and more about preserving something, your peace, your integrity, your capacity to live well. When you master the art of walking away, you are no longer at war with your own life. You are finally working with it. Eventually, you begin to understand that walking away is not an escape from responsibility, but an acceptance of it. Stoicism places responsibility squarely where it belongs, on your choices. You are not responsible for how others behave, but you are responsible for how long you tolerate what harms you. This realization is sobering because it removes the comfort of blaming circumstances or people, but it is also empowering because it gives control back to you. You may also notice how often walking away is delayed by the need for certainty. People want guarantees that leaving is the right move, that life will improve, that the pain will be worth it. Stoicism does not offer guarantees. It offers principles. The Stoic acts according to reason and virtue, not outcomes. If staying violates reason and virtue, then leaving is justified, even if the future is unclear. Waiting for certainty often means waiting too long. Another important shift is how you handle guilt. Guilt often appears when you prioritize yourself after long periods of self-neglect. Stoicism teaches that guilt is not always a moral signal. Sometimes it is just conditioning. You are trained to equate self-sacrifice with goodness, but sacrifice without wisdom leads to resentment. When you walk away and guilt arises, the Stoic does not panic. They observe it, question it, and refuse to let it dictate action. There is also a quiet recalibration of your standards. After you walk away from something misaligned, you become more intentional about what you allow back into your life. You stop accepting half-effort, vague promises, and inconsistent behavior, not because you are rigid, but because you have experienced the cost of tolerance. Stoicism refines your standards through experience, not theory. As this mindset deepens, you begin to feel less reactive. You no longer need dramatic confrontations to feel justified. You no longer need closure from people who cannot give it. Stoicism teaches that closure is an internal decision. The moment you decide that your peace matters more than being understood, the chapter is closed. And perhaps the most freeing realization of all is this: walking away does not mean the other side was wrong and you were right. It simply means the fit was wrong. Stoicism removes the need for villains. It replaces judgment with discernment. When you can walk away without hatred, without blame, and without regret, you are no longer trapped by the past. You are positioned for a cleaner future. As this way of thinking settles in, you start to notice how much of your life improves simply because you stop forcing alignment where it doesn't exist. Stoicism teaches that harmony cannot be manufactured through effort alone. It emerges naturally when values, actions, and environment support one another. When they don't, no amount of endurance will fix the imbalance. Walking away becomes less about loss and more about restoring order. You also begin to see how often people confuse attachment with love. Real care does not require self-destruction. The Stoics believed that love, friendship, and duty should strengthen character, not weaken it. If a connection consistently pulls you away from your best self, it is not deepening you, it is depleting you. Letting go in this case is not coldness, it is wisdom. Another layer of maturity appears when you stop needing permission to leave. Many people wait for validation, for someone to say, yes, you're justified. Stoicism teaches self-authorization. If you have examined the facts, reflected calmly, and acted in line with your values, that is enough. Outsiders may misunderstand your decision, but clarity does not require consensus. There is also a long-term effect that few people anticipate. When you consistently walk away from what violates your standards, your life begins to self-correct. You attract fewer chaotic situations because you no longer tolerate them. You spend less time repairing damage and more time building something stable. This is not luck. It is the compound effect of disciplined choices. Over time, the fear around walking away fades. You trust that you can survive endings. You trust that discomfort is temporary. You trust that your ability to rebuild is stronger than your fear of loss. Stoicism trains this trust, not through affirmations, but through repeated, reasoned action. Each time you choose alignment over attachment, you reinforce your resilience. There is also a quiet grief that sometimes accompanies walking away, even when it is the right decision. Stoicism does not deny this grief. It allows it without letting it rule you. You can mourn what might have been while still accepting what is. Emotional honesty and rational clarity can coexist. That balance is central to Stoic strength. And eventually, you reach a place where walking away no longer feels like an event. It feels like maintenance. Just as you maintain your body or your finances, you maintain your inner life. You remove what disrupts it, not out of anger, but out of care. This is the Stoic rule fully integrated, not as a concept, but as a way of living. At this stage, walking away becomes less about reacting to problems and more about honoring direction. You are no longer asking, is this unbearable? But is this where my life is meant to go? Stoicism shifts the focus from tolerable pain to meaningful movement. Even situations that are not terrible can still be wrong if they keep you stationary while your inner compass points elsewhere. You also begin to recognize how often staying is fueled by nostalgia. We hold on to memories of better moments and use them to justify present dissatisfaction. Stoicism teaches you to live in the present, not in echoes of the past. What mattered yesterday does not automatically deserve your loyalty today. Decisions must be based on what is real now, not what once felt possible. Another refinement is learning the difference between patience and postponement. Patience is deliberate and time-bound. Postponement is vague and endless. When you say, "I'll wait and see," the Stoic asks, "For how long and based on what evidence?" Without clear conditions, waiting becomes avoidance. Walking away, in this sense, is not impatience, it is clarity. There is also a subtle power in leaving before resentment takes root. Resentment poisons even good qualities. It turns kindness into obligation and generosity into bitterness. Stoicism protects you from this by encouraging early, reasoned exits. You preserve your ability to remain fair and calm by not pushing yourself past your limits. As this practice deepens, you stop narrating your life as a series of sacrifices. You stop seeing yourself as the one who always endures. Instead, you see yourself as someone who chooses deliberately. That identity shift is powerful. You are no longer defined by what you put up with, but by what you stand for. There is also a strengthening of inner silence. When you are no longer constantly negotiating, justifying, or explaining, your mind becomes quieter. Stoicism values this inner stillness because it allows reason to operate without interference. Walking away clears mental space. In that space, better decisions become possible. And in time, you realize that the Stoic rule for walking away is not about becoming detached from life. It is about becoming more fully engaged with the right parts of it. When you release what drains you, you have more presence, energy, and attention for what deserves it. That is not withdrawal. That is wisdom in motion. At the end of it all, the Stoic rule for knowing when to walk away is not complicated, but it is demanding. It asks you to choose truth over comfort, alignment over attachment, and self-respect over fear. Walking away is not a failure of endurance. It is the completion of wisdom. It is the moment you stop negotiating with what drains you and start committing to what strengthens you. When you master this rule, your life becomes quieter, cleaner, and more intentional. You stop wasting years proving your loyalty to situations that were never loyal to you. You begin living with fewer regrets because your decisions are no longer driven by guilt, habit, or hope without evidence. If this way of thinking resonated with you, if it helped you see a situation in your life more clearly, support the work by liking this video, sharing it with someone who may need it, and subscribing to Psychovest. This channel is about building mental discipline, emotional clarity, and self-mastery in a world that constantly pulls you off course. Stay with us and continue learning how to live with strength, reason, and quiet confidence.